Welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast. Back with our final Big East team preview. The Georgetown Hoyas coming off a much improved season last year in Ed Cooley's second year. 2-18 his first year, 8-12 last year. Finished with a winning record overall at 18-16. Now, they saw Thomas Sorber go in the first round. Obviously, lost him partway through the year last year due to a foot injury. But now a new look Hoyas team. Before we dive into their offense and defensive outlook, if you are liking the content we've been putting out, please go ahead and like and subscribe. We do appreciate all of your support. But looking at this particular Georgetown team, right, very guard heavy. No secret there, and then kind of some guys in the front court that haven't really played a ton. So on the offensive side, I guess starting with strengths, what do we see in this team?
Yeah, I think the biggest strength here is probably their on-ball scoring and playmaking ability. We're bringing Mack back, who wasn't all that efficient, but he's a pretty talented on-ball scorer overall, and he's probably going to operate as the point guard for most of the season. And then Ed Cooley, he added more perimeter pieces, like you mentioned, and in KJ Lewis coming from Arizona, Langston Love from Baylor, Jeremiah Williams from Rutgers, and Deshaun Harris-Smith from Maryland, who they're all capable of putting the ball on the deck and getting a bucket when they need to. Guys like Williams and Harris-Smith probably more valuable in transition, getting downhill to the rim, and they're capable of making a play for someone else also. And like I mentioned, Mack, he's going to take on the highest usage here. And I have, obviously I have some concerns later with how these guys fit, but I do think they have some guys on the ball that are going to be able to make some plays. And in the front court, I think Julius Halifonia is going to be the guy that's going to start at the center spot. He's someone to monitor, and he's a skill-based big who I think there's some potential for him to be a post hub for this offense. Sorber took on some of that role last year, but I do think a guy like Halifonia is going to be, more of an offensive-minded big that is going to be able to make some plays for others also. It's just going to be a matter of, can this team space the floor around him? He only played 6 games last season due to a fractured ankle. So I guess it kind of remains to be seen, like either how he recovered from that and what he's going to look like. But I do think there's some upside with Halifonia.
Hold on one sec. One sec. Are they still in here?
You're on the other side, yeah. We're going to leave. We're going to just get out.
We're going to be done in like 10 minutes.
Okay, we'll go up.
Literally put the do not disturb up.
Who came in?
It was Braden and Jamal.
Oh.
Acting like idiots. They open the door. I'm like, get out. And then they just stand here. Like, why? Like, all right.
Yeah. I mean, I was done, so you can just.
No, I know. What?
She has to come in here. She's ready. So you can go outside.
I put it up because I said I was good. Unless we really need it.
Thank you. What's up, Sol?
4 should be fine. Thank you.
Fine.
That should be fine. Thank you so much. Thank you. Do you need a face cloth? Yes, please. Those ones, yes. C.
CD Lamb out 3 to 4 weeks.
C.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, thank you. Thank you.
What?
Thank you.
I think they're pissed. I don't really care, but okay. Trying to get myself back in a back in where the spot I was in. I mean, yeah, I agree with the points you made about the guards kind of being the strength, particularly. Their on ball scoring. Malik Mack and KJ Lewis, I think, is a piece that, while not much of a shooter himself, has the ability to generate offense, whether that's in the mid range, like in the paint, or getting to the foul line. Right, he's a guy that last year was just about 50% free throw rate. Right, and he shoots the free throw despite not being a good shooter. Shoots the free throw quite well, around 80%. So I think he's going to be able to generate some offense there. And then, like you mentioned, some of those other guys that, while they aren't great half-court offensive players or shooters, do have the ability to play in transition and help in that area. But the front court, right, is kind of uncertain. I guess on the offensive end, it's a very guard-heavy group. That, like, shifting into weaknesses, right? It's a really poor 3-point shooting group, right? Like, Malik Mack is a 35% 3-point shooter, and that's like one of their higher percentages. Langston Love, I think, it projects to be their best shooter, even though he didn't have a great year last year at 31%. For his career, he's 38% on 219 attempts. So really solid piece there. And then, like, KJ Lewis, not a good shooter at all. Last year, 13 for 69 from three. Jeremiah Williams, Deshaun Harris-Smith, same thing, both not good shooters. And then the front court doesn't really project to be a floor spacing group really at all. Like maybe California, he was 2 for 8 last year in his 6 games played. So maybe he provides some floor spacing at 7 feet, but like it doesn't really project all that well.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there are some concerns across the board. Yeah, uncertain front court, and like I like California, but it's just we'll see how much he plays, and Iwuchukwu as his replacement isn't the greatest offensive piece. Sort of being nice about it. He's more of a defensive minded guy, but yeah, I just don't think the guards fit all that well together. I think there are too many ball dominant players that struggle to shoot and have struggled with inefficiency their entire career. Like KJ Lewis, Williams, and Smith, I think, are really going to struggle to provide floor spacing. And Langston Love just isn't really a guy that's reliable, to stay on the floor consistently. He's dealt with some injuries throughout his career, so hopefully he's healthy and can provide like a 38 to 40% clip from three. But we just don't know how often we're gonna see him out there. And I think these factors, I think it's going to lead to an offense that's going to struggle pretty mightily in the half court, and they're going to have to get out in transition as often as possible, which I think is a real strength with their defensive playmakers, as we'll talk about in a second here. But yeah, I just think guys like Caleb Williams and Isaiah Abraham on the wings are potential helpers with the off-ball shooting, but I wouldn't consider them like anything above average in this regard. And just Ed Cooley offenses are typically a step behind their defense, and this kind of looks like a similar case this year. And shot diet has always been a concern with Ed Cooley offenses. Last year's team was in the 77th percentile in field goal attempt percentage from the mid-range, and I do think this rate could even go up with this group. There's a lot of guys here that can only fan their game out to the mid-range. Like if they can't get to the rim, they're gonna settle for those pull-ups there, and just not sure how efficient they can be. They can be as efficient as they want. If they're taking a ton of mid-range looks and not able to space the floor at all, there's not going to be any sort of ceiling on the offensive side. And it's a group that's not really going to be a fantastic offensive rebound team. So, not being able to get second chances when, you're not all that efficient from the floor just creates a not so great offense.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think efficiency is going to be a problem, right? With guys that like to live in the mid-range, we've seen just it's facts that, that's the most inefficient shot in basketball right now. I mean, unless you're like elite at it, like a guy like Kevin Durant or something, like it's not a good shot, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
So, no, but shifting now to the defensive side, like I do think this defense has some playmakers. They do have some potential, like rim protection upside, right? With a guy like Vincent Iwuchukwu, Halifonia, I think is solid there as well. And then the guard defensive playmakers, I think, like a guy like KJ Lewis is a guy I think that can create some plays and get them out in transition. He boasts like a 3% career steal rate, career 3% block rate, which is pretty good for a 6'4" guard. So I think they can get out in transition and make plays and hopefully generate some offense that way, where they're going to be lacking in the shooting department, which could lead to, like we said, some struggles in the half court. They can generate some offense in the transition game that would be extremely beneficial to their success.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the wing depth and talent of depth, I think, is really impressive on this team. I think they're going to hang their hat on the side of the ball, and I think the personnel on the perimeter looks really good. KJ Lewis, Jeremiah Williams, and Harris Smith are all like well above average on ball defenders, particularly Lewis. He's unbelievable, and I think there's a real chance he can win Defensive Player of the Year in this league if this defense finishes in the top 3 in the league, which I think is a real possibility. And yeah, like you mentioned, these guys are going to be able to make plays on the ball without having to scheme ways to force turnovers. These guys could just make plays out of nothing. Like guys like Lewis and Malik Mack a little bit, and like Williams plays much bigger than his 6'4" frame. Probably has a 6'8", 6'9" wingspan. I think overall it's going to be a pretty impressive group, and perimeter-based offenses are going to have a really tough time. Iwuchukwu he's a good rim protector, obviously, but we're just going to have to see how much he plays. He probably ends up splitting with Halifonia because they're very different types of players, and I think it's going to depend on what Ed Cooley wants to emphasize.
Yeah. Shifting to weaknesses, like this defense, just like looking at like the height chart, right? I think like it's very, like you mentioned, guys, there are guys that play a little bit bigger, but they all kind of live in that 6'2" to 6'5" range, and then everyone else that's going to play, I guess, other than potentially Caleb Williams and Abraham at 6'7", they're over 7 feet. So I do wonder in certain matchups, like if they want to be effective on both ends of the floor in particular, the depth on the wing against in certain matchups is, I guess, a little bit of a concern for me. I think it's going to require guys to sometimes guard a little bit bigger if they want to be still as impactful as they can be on the offensive end.
Yeah, I personally think they're going to be okay here because I do think there are a lot of guys on this roster that play much bigger. Like, Deshaun Harris Smith is a bowling ball out there at 6'5". KJ Lewis, I think he plays like a guy that's 6'8". I think he can guard realistically 1 through 4 and be just fine, even though he's listed at 6'4". I don't know if Langston Love's actually 6'5". I think he's a little bit smaller than that. I think he'd be one of the guys that I would be concerned about. He's probably the weak point of the perimeter defense out of this rotation. But my main concern was the front court depth, and like Iwuchukwu was solid, like I mentioned, but I think his offensive deficiencies may limit his role a little bit. And like I've mentioned with Halifonia, he's more offensive minded, like below the rim big, and I don't really think he fits the mold as a defensive big for Ed Cooley. And he's always had that. And like a guy like Thomas Sorber was a perfect fit for this defense, and he was just a real talent. And I don't think they found a guy to replace that at any sort of level. So I do think the wings are going to have a real responsibility when it comes to keeping teams away from the rim. And overall, I think they can be just fine. But I do think rim protection, potentially defensive rebounding could become concerns.
Yeah, certainly with depth, it's a concern, and I think defensive rebounding is definitely fair with a group that's so heavily predicated on like guard playmaking on both ends. You're a little bit lacking on the defensive glass more than likely. So I think those are definitely valid concerns. Now moving ahead to MVP and X Factor, who do you have here for Georgetown?
For my MVP, I went with KJ Lewis. I think what he's going to do on both sides of the ball is going to be really important for this team, particularly defensively. Like I mentioned, I think he can win Defensive Player of the Year in this league, and that's actually my bold prediction is like, if this team is top 3 in the league, I do think he ultimately is the reason why. So I would go with him as my Big East Defensive Player of the Year for a different guy for the the first time since Kalkbrenner had that 4-year run. But yeah, so I think he's going to be important on the offensive side as well. It might not be all that efficient, but I think his dribble creation in the mid-range and scoring at the rim, getting to the free throw line is going to be probably their most efficient offense, as sad as that is to say. But I do think he ultimately is the highest impact on this team. For X Factor, I went with Julius Halifonia. I think mostly just because of the offensive upside, and if they can work through him in the post, I think some things are going to be able to be opened up for this team. And there are some people that are high on California. I'm not overly excited about his fit here, but if his talent wins out on the offensive side, I think this team has more of a ceiling than we see right now.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. I went KJ Lewis at MVP as well. Just I think his playmaking on both sides is going to be too important to this team, and I think he'll be able to, like you said, get to the foul line. I think is going to be a real strength for this team. That when they're in search of offense, which is definitely going to happen at times. He's a strong physical guard. I think that will be able to get his head down and get into the lane and generate opportunities at the foul line for them to pick up a couple of easy points when they're struggling. And then for X Factor, I actually went with the other big. I went with Vincent Iwuchukwu, and just really for the defensive side of the ball. Like we know kind of the perimeter should be good, but it's that backline rim protection that is a little bit more uncertain. We saw him only play 16% of minutes last year. He played 36% the year before at USC. So just not a big sample size from him. So I think he's going to need to be really important, I think, to the defensive side of the ball for the Hoyas if they want to reach their ceiling. I think that I just don't really trust, I guess, Halifonia as much on the defensive end. So I think it just puts more pressure on Iwuchukwu to be that good in rim protection. Yeah,
I would agree. I think Halifonia is more of an upside guy for me. Ultimately, yeah. I think they end up splitting minutes, and it might be a little bit more matchup dependent. But yeah, I think Iwuchukwu is going to be important on the defensive side too. Yeah. Now shifting to ceiling and floor, and then bold prediction. I think you already kind of mentioned yours. What do you see ceiling and floor wise? Yeah. Bold prediction was KJ Lewis for Defensive Player of the Year, but ceiling, I said 4th or 5th in the Big East. I think the defense has a real chance to carry the way to get this team into the top half and potentially get them into the bubble conversation. I think that's kind of where their peak is, but their floor, I had them somewhere in the bottom 4 in the Big East with no tournament. I just think if the half court offense is, as poor as I think it's going to be, I think there's a real chance that this is the second worst offense in the league, which I don't think you can get into the tournament with an adjusted offense in the 150s to 175 range. So ultimately, I think, bottom 4 of the league is their floor. Yeah, I went similar I went 5th at the ceiling, maybe 4th, but I think 5th is a good spot for this team just because of the offense. And then 10th at the floor, I think similarly because of offensive inefficiency.
and then potentially like rim protection depth, or just how those guys kind of fit and play in bigger roles now. And then bold prediction, I actually went with on the upper end. I said they win 10 games in the Big East, which is their most since 2014-15. So be their most in 11 years, in year 3 under Ed Cooley.
Yeah, I think that's in the realm of possibility, especially with this league being as open as it is after the first 2 teams.
Yeah, I think there's a real chance that we could see this league have just like a bunch of teams in that like middle of the pack number of wins, where there's a lot of teams kind of hovering that 500 mark.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be, the 2 teams at the top probably only losing 4 or 5 games at the most, and then the 2 bottom teams, like a Seton Hall, losing, like going like 2-18 in the league, and then that like 3 to 8 range potentially all being right around 500.
Right. Yeah. So that wraps things up for Georgetown and for our Big East team previews. But we'll see you next time on the Mainly Hoops podcast as we shift into our next conference.